Hi guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, we're looking at the classical defense in the Ruy Lopez opening. The Ruy Lopez contains these moves e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6 defending the pawn, bishop to b5. In this position, black plays the classical defense with bishop to c5. This is the move that differentiates this particular variation with other defenses in the Ruy Lopez. In this position, there are a couple of replies that white can start with. Among all, we are going to look at 3. The continuations include pawn to c3, castling the king to safety, and knight takes pawn. There are many others. However, we are going to limit it to these 3 for simple understanding. Let's start with the first one. Pawn takes. You see, as a beginner, there are many ideas and tactical concepts that comes to the mind very easily when spotting a certain familiar position, such as this one. I have seen most beginners make this mistake where, since bishop to c5 comes up, they believe they can throw in d4 after taking this pawn. So if knight takes in a hurry, naturally, you expect knight to take the knight, then you can throw in this beautiful d4. These are tactical maneuvers. It makes sense in the sense that if black decides to save the bishop, pawn takes knight, bishop takes. Now you have successfully opened up the d file. You are prepared to bring in the knight, castle your king. So the advantage you've gained is much easier to spot as white compared to what black has achieved. However, if we go back some moves to this position, an opponent who studied to play the classical variation with bishop to c5 would learn this response. Instead of taking the knight right away, you can simply take the pawn here on f2 with check to the king. King takes the bishop. Now knight takes knight. What did you observe? Black has systematically removed the right for white king to castle and has also taken a pawn in return. So the advantage is now drifted towards black direction. The queen is coming to harass the king soon. There are more ideas with check. Aside from coming to f3 with the queen, there are ideas here too, which might provoke pawn push and kick the king around. There's also pawn push. There is this pawn first because this pawn is pinned, so it cannot be pushed quickly. There's pushing out the bishop around very early, defending the knight, then opening diagonal for the bishop to use in the future. Queen can come in. This idea is easily connected to the classical defense because of bishop to c5. That bishop made this position possible. We are back here. We just saw beginners' ideas and beginners' approach to pawn to c5. Let's dive in further to more experienced play with castling. There are basic ways black can continue in this position. There is knight to f6 right away, and there is knight over to d4. If white goes for knight to f6, the idea is simple. Why? Black wants to castle the king to safety. At the same time, black is also attacking a pawn in the center. So there is nothing to fear here as black because black got everything under control. In the sense that you cannot simply throw in sneaky moves in the center anymore. You cannot simply play bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and believe you are safe to capture this pawn alone. In this position, there's a knight to take the pawn back. So knight to f6 is a logical play. The second continuation also is knight moving over to d4. Most beginners fall for this trick. It's not really a trick, but an oversight, something that makes you remain in the same level, a minor mistake you do because you fail to observe a certain position. The pattern of the knight works well when you study about the knight thoroughly and remember how it moves. This knight is placed on d4. It does not only attack the knight or poses an exchange for the knight, it is now attacking the bishop also. So you must not forget that. Because you see that this pawn is undefended on e5, you might be quick to capture the pawn and think you are safe, forgetting that there is a bishop here, and in just these simple moves, you have lost a valuable piece. So if we go with the main line, knight 6 knight, bishop will take the knight. You can throw in a sneaky attack with pawn to c3. Bishop has to go back to b6. That is the best move in this position because if bishop goes back to c5, you can develop with tempo with pawn to d4. Pawn takes, still attack the bishop again. This will make black push the bishop back up. So moving the bishop down to b6 solves the whole threat and keep the balance. So in this position, white can simply throw in pawn to d4 right away. If pawn to d4, black would want to find a way to maintain balance on this board. However, if he wants to defend this pawn with the pawn, he can't do it right away because the pawn is pinned. So we'll try the idea pawn to c6. Bishop drops back, then d6 follows. This setup are basic main lines and strategic understanding of this position. However, white has castled the king. Black is still prepared to castle the king. So the last move, d6, defends the pawn. The question on this position now in this board is what will you do with the knight? It is simply clear that the bishop can be developed in just a single move to this square and somewhere better, rather still this square. So where will you love to place the knight? Putting the knight here on d2 will permit pawn takes, bishop take. Black will gain an extra pawn. So a good square for the knight to start with is knight to a3. With this strategic idea, if knight to a3, knight comes out so that black can castle the king to safety. Bishop comes out to g5, which pins the knight. You can simply see that black castles the king. Then the knight easily have access to c2 to support this pawn in the center, or to c5, or to c4 rather, to join forces to support this pawn in taking the pawn and to put pressure on the bishop. These ideas are quite useful. Most times, after you played your move, probably you reposition your knight to attack the bishop. Black can drop back the bishop. In cases where you put knight here, you have obstructed some movement for the bishop. So we have to be careful and observe how your bishop would be on that particular square. In playing knight to c2, black can choose to say he wants to chase the bishop away by playing pawn to h6, attacking the bishop. You can drop your bishop back. We have to be extra careful. If black is overzealous with pawn push, do not worry, do not panic. Just drop down your bishop. If it takes the pawn here, you can simply take this pawn. If it takes, you can choose to eliminate your bishop. You can open up with this. So if this happens, trade off the queens, rook takes, you can drop down your bishop. Temporarily, this pawn cannot be defended with a pawn. This pawn might be a weakness in the future. So let's consider playing pawn to c3 right away. We have looked at castling. This position is mostly played by experienced player, and the purpose of playing pawn to c3 can be seen instantly. If knight to f6, trying to castle the king to safety, d4 comes up instantly. In this position, bishop to b6. If pawn takes pawn right away, white will take the pawn, kicking the bishop back, or bishop can rather still give a check from here. It is possible to block with the bishop. Bishop takes, knight takes. The pawns are defended in the center. The pawns controls some valuable portions in the center, and this is looking very scary against black in this position. So after pawn push to d4, bishop goes back home. It is easy to understand that this pawn here is under attack by the knight. So bishop comes out to pin the knight to the queen. In this position, black will castle the king to safety, white castles. We should not forget this pawn also is still undefended. So if h3 comes up to kick the bishop, bishop to h4 keeps the tension. I would love to draw out some conclusion here. We should not be too fast to push pawn to g5. The reason why you castled as black in the first place is to keep your king safe. Overextension of your pawns can weaken the pawn structure around the king. So, while playing positions like this, you have to be very careful and cautious of how you push your kingside pawns. For now, these are basic ideas connected to the classical defense. If you study Grandmaster's games, study strategic maneuvers of their pieces, you will get to understand better of why they play and choose some certain opening choices. Thank you for watching. See you in other videos on this channel. Till then, stay safe.